Great. So hi, my name is Afton. I'm co-founder and CEO of a company called Modern Fertility. And before I started Modern Fertility, I was a product manager at 23andMe. And I have to say, when I moved out to San Francisco about 5-6 years ago, I had no idea that product management was even a profession. And so I have to say that after spending time in product management, I think it is one of the coolest, most impactful jobs. And so I'm just so excited to be in front of all of you today. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my path to starting Modern Fertility, why I believe product managers make absolutely amazing founders, and a little bit on just how we built this, how we went from 0 to 1 and starting Modern Fertility, some of the lessons learned, and quite honestly, ones we're still learning every day today. So to start, I just wanted to spend 2 minutes and give you a high level of what is Modern Fertility. So Modern Fertility, we're a women's health company focused on making personalized fertility information more accessible to women earlier in life. And so our first product, the Modern Fertility Hormone Test, has taken the same exact laboratory test that you would do in an infertility clinic, typically if a female or couple is having trouble getting pregnant. And we've taken those exact same tests out of the clinic and made them accessible to women earlier in life at a fraction of the cost in a really easy to access format. So the majority of our customers are about 1 to 3 years away from actively trying to conceive. Whether they want kids or not, they're just looking for more information about their reproductive health so that they can make the decisions that are right for them. So really, Modern Fertility is all about providing more access to reproductive health information so that we can own the decisions impacting our bodies and futures, whatever those decisions might be. And so the product itself is fun. It's both hardware and software. And so the way that it works is you come to our site, you request a test. From there, you either go to a Quest Diagnostics facility or you can test at home through a simple finger prick. And then you get access to the Modern Fertility experience. And basically, we have a content management system on steroids. We can customize every word of every sentence. So it's like you're talking to your OBGYN, who also happens to be your best friend, and she has like 10 twins in the room, and you're just getting all of these different perspectives. And then in addition to our digital reports, you also have access to a one-on-one consult with a fertility nurse and a weekly webinar that we call an Aganar, and access to a community of modern women, the matriarchy. And so in starting Modern Fertility, there are some people like my co-founder Carly who never thought in a million years that she would start a company. And then there's me. I started my first company in high school. I don't think I knew at the time that it was entrepreneurship, and the names have gotten a little bit better since then. It was called Safe H2O West, and so this was a water quality testing company. And so I grew up in rural Maryland, middle of nowhere, and one day at my public high school, we had to start drinking from bottled water. And so I asked my teacher, why did we have to start doing this? And they said, oh, because the well had, the water test had failed, and because we failed, you have to drink bottled water. And so I went home from school that day, and I asked my family, hey, Mom and Dad, have we ever tested our water supply? And they said, no, not since we moved in 10 years ago. And so I was like, well, that's a little bit strange. And so for my mandatory science fair project, I just went out and I started testing all of these different wells in the community and found a massive issue with the water quality in my community. The next year, I redid the project on a much larger scale, and I was so excited. I got to go to the International Science and Engineering Fair, life-changing. But I also really wanted to do something about what I was finding. And so I was so excited. I took all of my findings. I made an appointment with the Department of Health, and I presented my findings, and they responded with threatening a lawsuit against my family. And so at that point, I was shocked, and I just couldn't believe that the way that the system was set up, nobody was incentivized to provide the people in my county with more education and more low-cost testing services. And so I decided to just take matters into my own hands and start a water quality testing company. And so we set up a website. I got a local lab to donate money, and we bought all of the different types of testing equipment. And then I needed people to test, and so I realized that people that had detention, it was Wednesdays after school, and so we made water water quality testing Wednesdays, and I got all the people with detention to come perform all of the tests. It was great. And it was this incredibly impactful experience for me, because I think at that point in time, I had the good fortune of being an entrepreneur before I knew what entrepreneurship was. And then I also had the ability to kind of push past imposter syndrome before I knew what imposter syndrome was. And yes, we all feel it. But every time I encounter imposter syndrome today, I just look at it like it's a choice and just decide how I'm going to react. The final part of that experience is just I learned at a really young age, I was 13 at the time, what it meant to work really hard. I was getting to school early, I was missing my lunch, we had water quality testing Wednesdays and doing things every day after school. And I realized I was never the smartest person in the room. I wasn't the smartest person in any one of my classes, but I knew I could work harder than anyone. And that confidence, that perspective has really served me well over the course of my career. So fast forward from there, high school, college. My first job was at a healthcare private equity fund. And so my job was to look at sectors of healthcare that were interesting, growing, had some consolidation potential. And because of my personal interest in women's health, I started spending a lot of time there. And so within women's health, I started spending a lot of time in fertility and infertility. And I felt like I had just uncovered this treasure trove of information. And so at the age of 23, I was basically diving into infertility and seeing this massive growth rate, this massive CAGR that the country wasn't talking about at the time, and definitely not my friends. And so I felt like I had access to this unique kind of piece of information about society that no one else was talking to. And I just felt really empowered by all of that information, and that I had to do something about it. And then on the flip side, as part of being in private equity, you really have to understand the business models. And so the business model of infertility at the time was something that was really good for private equity. It had high margins. But what that meant for women in a sector where it was mostly self-pay, so instead of reimbursement and your insurance covering the infertility treatments, a lot of women were paying out of pocket. And so high margins meant that women were paying a lot for these procedures, yet the doctors and clinics were making a lot of money on margins that were much higher than the rest of healthcare. And there was something about that just didn't sit right with me. And so for the rest of my career, really from that point on until Modern Fertility, women's health and fertility was just something I kept coming back to. I couldn't get it out of my head. So I think really the important lessons learned from that experience were not only understanding how something worked, but really the broader system that interacts around this concept. So fast forward from there, I really missed the early stage side of things, going from 0 to 1, those water quality days. And so I was employee number 1 at an autism behavior phenotyping company out here. And so when you join somewhere as employee number 1, it's just we had raised some money, and you have all of these things that you're trying to do, and it's this constant just prioritization exercise where you have a limited runway, you have all of these different things to do to deliver value for your customers, but also prove out the business. And so every single day is a constant prioritization exercise. And so doing this as employee number 1 was just an exercise in prioritization that I think is incredibly important. And then within that experience, I was managing a remote product management team, and I was obsessed. This is when I discovered that this is just the coolest job that you could possibly have. And so I decided after that I really wanted to focus in on product management specifically. And I ended up joining 23andMe when they were in search of a lot of product managers to help relaunch the FDA cleared experience. So I joined when we were still shut down by the FDA to run the consumer tools division. So basically anything that you could do with your genetic information. And it was through my experience at 23andMe that we did a modified agile process. I learned what stakeholder management was and how to get buy-in from the organization to actually build what you wanted to build, and really these more traditional aspects. And so I have to say, in looking back, I think that science nerds make great product managers. And then I think that product managers really make great founders. And when I think back to all of the steps in my career, career, the easiest one was going from becoming a product manager to a founder. And that's because a lot of the skill sets overlap a lot. So when I think about a product manager, we spend so much of our time just talking to customers. And for founders, I remember at the beginning of Modern Fertility, we were talking to hundreds and hundreds of women because instead of getting the feedback to build your product and define your roadmap, you were getting that feedback to build your company. And it was incredibly important and quite parallel. From there, stakeholder management. So as a PM, you're constantly trying to get resources from your executive team within your organization to build what you want to build. That's really similar to fundraising. You're basically selling your product to venture capitalists if you decide to go that route, and trying to convince one of them to give you a couple $1 million so that you can go and build your idea, and maybe a couple of their friends or colleagues will come on too, and then you have a round. And so that's selling, just a different landscape. And then from there, it's prioritization. So prioritization, I just think, is such a core skill for product managers, and it's really the same within a company, except instead of just within the product org, it's the whole company. And so let's say you have one recruiter and you really need to hire a product manager, a member of your clinical team, and a growth marketer. How are you going to prioritize between those three roles? And then for your own personal time, are you going to spend time on product management or one of the million other things going on in the company? And so my favorite skill, though, of being a product manager is being able to look at a new market and decide what to do in it. And I think that this is the most fun. And as humans, just every single day, we're stimulated with so much information. So we are booking travel, and there's ways that we could improve that experience. We're ordering food, and there's ways that we could improve that. We're engaging in healthcare, and there's so many ways that we can improve that. But I really think that making that transition from PM to founder is constantly having that mentality, but just deciding where you're going to spend your time. And so for Modern Fertility, the company was born partially from a personal experience and partially from just understanding how the whole ecosystem of infertility worked and deciding how we wanted to navigate that. So on the personal story side, while I was at 23andMe, I remembered this baseline testing that I had learned about back when I was working in private equity, doing all of that research in the infertility, fertility space. And so I realized that I was waiting until later in life to start my own family, and I wanted more information about my biology. And so I went and tried to get that testing done. It was really hard. I'll save that story for another time. But at the end of it, it was just so impactful to get that information, to have a conversation with myself, my partner, my physician about my reproductive health. And when I really was thinking about that experience, talking to first my friends, then their friends, and hundreds of women about that experience, and then thinking about the broader infertility space and the shift that was happening, that is really what created the idea for Modern Fertility. So on the space side, we live in a society today where our entire healthcare system is focused on preventing pregnancy as opposed to planning for it, and our entire education system is focused on prevention. And so, as we are waiting until later in life to start their families, I was really talking to all of these women and finding out that there was this new space, this new segment of the population that was the planners, women that wanted more information about their bodies, yet weren't actively trying to conceive. And so all of these different pieces of information tied together and really created that aha moment, and trying to figure out the single most thing that I felt could change and make the lives of women more positive, more empowered, which was having access to this information and understanding what was going on in their own bodies so that they could make the decisions that were right for them. So as I sit in front of a room full of incredibly impressive product managers, I wanted to take some time and reflect back on what I felt were the three most important pieces of advice and perspective that I really held on to in the process of going from a PM to a founder. The first, I'm going to go through all three and then I'll give some examples. The first, as evidenced by my assortment of stock photography, is be the person that people want to do favors for. Second, obsess over your users. And third, think long-term, not short-term. So first, be the person that wants to do favors for. Modern Fertility and going from 0 to 1 was really a process of calling in every favor that every single one of my friends and former colleagues owed me, and a lot of favors that no one owed me. It was just a lot of asking. So for example, one of the designers on my team that had since left 23andMe, I called her up and I said, you know, we need all of these things. Here's what we're thinking. Can you help? And oh, if we do raise money someday, then I'll pay you. And she said, great, how can I help? I remember my good friend Eileen, we were working just around the clock trying to get the initial product together. And she called me and she said, Afton, like, are you okay? Can I like bring you lunch? And I said, well, you know, I don't need lunch, but if you want to come over and answer some support tickets, that would be great. And so she came over, started answering support tickets, and she still works for us today. And so from there, obsess over your users. And so when we were launching Modern Fertility, we didn't have the ability to test at home. That was an incredible effort. We published the results showing that a traditional blood draw and a finger prick could be used interchangeably in the American Academy for Obstetrics and Gynecology's Green Journal. We presented the results at the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. It was this massive study. But before we had that, we needed to show that this was something that women wanted. So instead of just telling people that, we decided to set up a mobile phlebotomy network all across San Francisco. So instead of people just doing a finger prick from home, we actually had mobile phlebotomy technicians, which are phlebotomists are people that can draw your blood, go to our users' houses, perform a blood draw, and then set up the whole logistics system to send that back to the lab. So obsess over your users, that those early adopters, those people that we had interactions with at the onset have just been so instrumental even today in continuing to build our company. And three, think long-term, not short-term. And so when you go from 0 to 1, when you're coming up with an idea for a company, there are a lot of ways to make money in the short term. You can sell data. You can do lead gen. And for us, and when I decided to quit my job, I was certain that I wanted to wake up every morning spending my time doing something that I truly believed in and not employing any of those practices. And so I truly wanted to think about the business model, how we would make money, and make sure that that was completely aligned with women in our case. And so this was something that was incredibly important to me, but also as we were going out and raising money, just having conversations with our potential investors and laying those hard boundaries and saying that this was how we were going to do things, here is how we were going to make money, and that we were not going to ever sell data, we were not going to ever push women towards a procedure that they might not need. And so understanding and holding firm on those beliefs and really thinking about the long term and the fact that women are smart and they will be able to understand these business models. And we wanted to find investors that truly aligned with that and believed that the businesses that were going to work were ones that were in the best interest of women. But most of all, when I think about going from from a product manager to becoming a founder, the biggest advice I can give is just to consider it, because while a product manager, I think, is one of the best ways that you can prepare for being a founder, it has the most parallels. The only thing that will prepare you for being a founder is actually becoming a founder and doing it. So yeah. That's me. That's my story. The parallels. I'm going to be around today in the exhibit hall from 2 to 4:30. We're selling tests. We're talking about product management, starting a company. We're also hiring. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but really appreciate being here. And yeah.